I always loved the idea of being a writer. It was the writing part that I couldn't stand. There were plenty of stories that I'd started writing, all of them sitting there in my drafts folder with creative titles and inventive character names, but not a single one of them was finished. Each would end abruptly, most not even making it past the drafting stage. I guess I would just get distracted, or let the crappiness of my own writing dissuade me. Regardless of which, I'd put any dream of finishing a writing project behind me. That was until I heard my friend James talking about the college history paper he'd completed last month. James was an even bigger procrastinator than me, and was on the verge of being kicked out of college, so this surprised me. He concurred. "Dude, I never would have gotten this paper done if I hadn't gone to that cafe," he chuckled to me. "They literally made me finish writing it. It was exactly what I needed." Apparently, Slacker James had discovered a cafe in our city that catered specifically to writers. So much so that it encouraged people in whatever ways it could to put pen to paper and complete their projects. I knew that writers often camped out in cafes like Starbucks and occupied tables with their laptops and notebooks for far too long. Such was the cliche. But an actual dedicated cafe for writers? That made a lot more sense. I figured this is what I'd been waiting for my whole life. If this place couldn't make me reach the end of a manuscript, then nothing could. I arrived at the location James gave me on a Saturday morning, MacBook in hand. The cafe looked fairly small from the outside, situated entirely indoors and between two other buildings. Printed above the door was a quaint sign saying, "Final Draft Cafe," with Japanese lettering beneath it. Upon entering the glass door to the cafe, I was quickly met by a friendly server with black hair and a white shirt. "Are you here to write?" she asked warmly, smiling, eyeing my laptop. "Yes," I replied, taking in the cozy interiors of the surprisingly spacious cafe. It was mostly empty, but had several people dotted throughout it, each either in a booth or at a small table, typing away next to half-sipped mugs. Some of this crowd really lived up to the stereotype of earthy writers with how disheveled they looked, I noted to myself. Almost no one registered my presence as my server led me to my booth. Equipped with a charging dock, spare pens, and cute plush handcrests, the wooden booth was the perfect place for me to write in. The odds of me finishing my story were already going up. As I got set up to write, the chipper server handed me a paper card to fill out. If only I knew how much power that little slip of paper would hold, I would have written something very different. Actually, I would have tore it up and walked out right then. "Please fill out this questionnaire before starting," the server gently requested. "This will allow us to help you in achieving your goal." The paper asked me to specify 3 specifications for while I was here: what I wanted to write, how long I wanted that writing to be, and how intense I wanted my motivational reminders to be. I had already decided that I wanted to write a novella I'd long dreamt of, a story about a young would-be sailor who is stranded at sea when his ship capsizes. The ocean had always enchanted me. I would title it "Not a Drop to Drink." I wanted it to be at least 20,000 words. As for the last question, I thought it was a joke. Of the options mild, moderate, and strong, I randomly picked moderate because I honestly thought it wouldn't matter. A motivational reminder from a cafe server wasn't going to make or break my story. With that, I handed the form back to the server, ordered a matcha latte, and started writing. For me, the first bursts of the story were always the easiest. It was engrossing to recount the first act of young protagonist Drago, who sets out to prove himself on the high seas before running into a massive, inescapable storm. But after a few hours of this commitment, the inevitable happened and my attention started to drift. I lazily started looking around the cafe at the other writers, intently tapping away like their lives depended on it. Maybe if I just scrolled on my phone for a bit, my inspiration would return. "Hey, what are you doing?" I swirled up from my phone to see the server from before screaming at me. "You're here to write, idiot, not play on your phone," she roared, snatching my phone away from me. "This is why you're a worthless failure who has never finished anything. Don't you want to write something for once instead of being a disappointment? I was speechless as she left the table with my empty dishes and phone. This was so absurd. It had to be a joke, right? I looked to my left at the booth with someone in it. Can you believe that? I asked, stunned. You really have no idea, do you? The bearded man muttered in a weary voice, not even looking up from his screen. The middle-aged gent was wearing a suit, yet looked a million miles from put together. He was covered in coffee stains, had bags under his eyes, and wore the faint scent of urine. What did you think you were signing up for? This cafe really doesn't let you leave, pal. Not until you've finished whatever it is you're writing. Panic reaching me, I stood up and spun around the room. I could see those same run-down traits in the other writers now. Faces of prisoners instead of patrons. Without even grabbing my laptop, I ran for the door, colliding with its glass frame with a loud thunk. It didn't even budge. Nor did the windows when I desperately pounded on them. Nor did the door to the kitchen when I tried the same. How could no one be able to break out of here? It was a tiny and homely cafe, not Fort Knox prison. Doing that won't work. We're stuck in here, sighed a woman nearest to the door, slouched at a computer under a head of frizzled hair. Just write your story. At least you didn't promise to write the next Jane Austen novel. She gestured to her smudged screen bitterly. In a daze, I sat back down at my booth. Hopelessly, I tried to comprehend the impossible situation I had signed my way into. I've been here for a year, I think, said the man next to me, solidifying my horror. A whole novel, I said I'd write. I'd never written anything before this. I watched one stupid sci-fi movie, got inspired, and thought this cafe would be the answer. Like you, I didn't think they'd really keep me here. He finally broke eyesight with his screen, looking me up and down. Then he asked me what writing commitments I'd promised to the cafe. 20,000 words. Oh, that's better. Especially since you've written before. Still not as easy as the yuppies who pledged to write 500 words. They breeze in and out of here like it's nothing. Most don't even learn of the prison that this place really is. Lucky fools. His wistful words were interrupted by a server softly reminding him to keep writing. Hi, sir. You should probably be getting back to your novel now, she whispered politely. We can't wait to read it. I couldn't believe how differently my booth neighbor was being treated versus the earful I'd gotten. Until I remembered, of course, that I'd selected moderate reminders. He, on the other hand, likely selected mild ones. A small mercy for him, at least. My fugue state continued on for days. I begrudgingly ordered food and drinks, used my handrest as a pillow to sleep at my booth, used the tiny cafe bathroom, pleaded with the staff to be let out, between rants from them to me. The restaurant never closed and the servers never seemed to leave. Wherever the inside of this restaurant was, it was a parallel world to the outside world. These dressing downs of me from the servers were getting nastier and more personal. Despite this, I still couldn't bring myself to write, but it was nowhere near as awful as the treatment of those who put down strong motivation on their form. Despite this, I still couldn't bring myself to write, but it was nowhere near as awful as the treatment of those who put down strong motivations on their form. Motivation on their form. Those people, when their time for motivational reminders came, were beaten with kitchen tools, had their workspaces roughed up, and were even denied the tea cakes and the tea they lived off of. Bloodstains replaced coffee stains on their clothes. We received these reminders every few hours. I didn't want to have to watch these people die here. My character Drago didn't want to watch his crewmates drown, and that's why he swam for land. That was the motivation I needed. Words started pouring out of me onto my Word document for not a drop to drink. First, I'd written 100, and then 500, and then 1,000, and then 10,000. Time had less and less meaning, although days were certainly continuing to pass. For energy, I chugged every beverage on the menu, from black teas to espresso shots to Red Bull cans, in a little over a week. I'd somehow finished the first draft of my story. All throughout this time, I saw the occasional new person come and go from the cafe. These newcomers were probably here to write some flash fiction short story, probably regarding my filthy haywire state with the same distaste that I had everyone else initially. They came and went the same day, some leaving after being shouted at, like me, but no worse for the wear. I didn't even think about trying to escape through the door when it opened for them. My only salvation would be through what I put on the page. Editing my story took half the time that it did to write it. All the pieces of it were just coming together and it was practically finishing itself. And then, at long last, my final draft was finished. 20,000 words. 3 weeks. All done. All done. Summoning my server over to me, I waited hesitantly while she assessed my story. She skimmed the entire thing in just a minute, and yet seemed to have internalized the whole draft. Smiling, she handed my questionnaire form back to my trembling hand, the completion box at the bottom marked with a tick. "Congratulations," she said, amiable as she'd been the first day. "Your story is wonderful. It evoked Life of Pi with hints of the Odyssey. The resolution of Drago was very satisfying, and his character arc was a narrative strong point. Please come back if you ever need help with writing a sequel." Shuddering at her words, I didn't look back at her or the imprisoned writers as I stepped out of the cafe into the beaming sunlight on the street. The brightness outside made me squint after a month inside. The glass door shut behind me, and suddenly I had no proof of what I went through. Except for the novella I'd written. Writing down the events of what happened in final draft came easily to me, even while sitting free at home instead of imprisoned at the cafe. I'm not sure how long this creative flow will last, but at least it allowed me to share my experiences. Of my 2 works, this is the one I want to publish. At the end of my novella, thirsty shipwreck survivor Drago, upon being finally rescued from his open sea ordeal, immediately drinks an entire galley full of beverages. Myself, if I never drink another beverage again, it'll be too soon. Thank you so much for making it to the end of this video. A quick shout out to my patrons, Old Penguin, Rinku Star, Melissa Perez, Icy Narrates, Seven Cities Journalist, Cupcake Hips, Eric Cifuentes, Alonso, Austin My Love, Ellie Hutmeyer, Jesse Hartley, Lawrence Wallen, Mr. Sankofa, and William Hartley. I always try to link a different charity in the description, so go ahead and check that out. I'm also going to start having more things on my Patreon soon, so keep your eyes peeled. And as always, I'd love to know how I can be praying for you, so go ahead and drop a comment and let me know how I can do that. Thank you so much, and I hope to see you in the next video.